The reason why you've stumbled across this video is most likely because you've been on the lookout for advice whether gloves and shoes make sense in sim racing. I know this is a highly subjective topic, but maybe I can help you being a little more decisive in your sim racing journey. One thing in advance though, there is no right or wrong here. In the end, it all comes down to personal preference and you just have to try it out for yourself.
In this video.
Race drivers, whether we're talking about Formula, GT or even rally car drivers, need to build up consistency to become perfect in what they're doing since, well, consistency is key and practice makes perfect. What I mean by that is not only the way they learn how to handle the car, but also the way it's operated physically. And when we're talking about physically, I'm speaking of haptics and feedback that need to stay consistent over the course of the race. If I were to use my wheel without gloves, the conditions around my racing are changing over time. They're not consistent, and that has a direct impact on my performance. You see, if I'm racing without gloves, my hands are getting sweaty more and more over time, and every available wheel out there is different in the way the grips are assembled. Some may have Alcantara, others are rubbery and smooth, and then there are some wheel rims made out of leather, which also might be perforated. Now, I don't have overly sweaty hands, but I certainly notice it when I'm not wearing gloves. It starts to get slippery, and eventually I'm gonna be adjusting my grip more and more often while I'm in a race. Gloves just guarantee to have the same texture to them until they are fully worn down and need to be replaced. Another reason to wear gloves, especially on a direct drive wheelbase, is that they do actually offer an additional layer of protection. When I'm letting go of the wheel, it often leads to it having an ultra spasm, which is really hard to catch. And even though all of the buttons and shifters tend not to have any sharp edges, the amount of force that can be produced by a direct drive wheelbase shouldn't be taken lightly. Fellow YouTuber Dave Cam recently got hit by his wheel, which actually injured his thumb so that it started bleeding in the middle of a race. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check it out if you want. I can't say for sure if gloves would have helped here, but it's at least one more layer of protection than solely your bare skin. And last but not least, the benefit of wearing gloves is hygiene. I do clean my whole sim rig regularly and keep it from catching dust as good as I can. You might be thinking that maybe I'm a little bit picky, but I really like my gear to be as clean as possible to ensure it having a long lifespan and quality if I ever might want to sell parts of it. Using gloves just helps to keep away any aggressive sweat and oils from my fingers. Gloves can get washed and everyone is happy. So, which gloves to take then? Well, people who frequently drift might prefer smoother gloves to be able to let the wheels slide better, while others prefer really sticky ones to ensure maximum grip at high torque outputs. If you're looking up the internet, you'll find tons of results for sim racing gloves, but these might be very expensive right away. If you want to give it a try first, just go get yourself some gardening gloves or cycling gloves that feature a little bit of padding on the palms. This is what I would recommend. Nowadays, almost all of these are going to be suitable for touch displays, by the way. Shoes are an even more subjective thing than gloves, I guess. There are many sim racing related content creators that I watch regularly, and I was actually pretty astounded when I saw how many of these guys are racing in socks when they first introduced the foot cam. To me, it's the same thing as with gloves. Exactly since day 2 of my sim racing journey, I was using shoes, and I always feel uncomfortable whenever I'm just quickly testing something on the rig whilst only wearing socks. Sim racing is exhausting, I know, and one can get pretty sweaty when running for a longer session, but I'd rather play with a controller instead of wheel and pedals than not using shoes. The only thing I could think of which might be somewhat impactful on your actual performance when not wearing shoes might be the bad habit of curling your toes and pulling the pedals. This not only puts more stress on the individual components of your pedals, but it also introduces somewhat of a, wrong way how these are intended to be used. Many of you might already know a technique called trail braking. In a nutshell, you're not intended to hit the brake hard and let go of it once you're slowed down enough to go into a corner, but you rather brake hard initially and let go of the pedal smoothly while you're already steering into the corner. This ultimately is the faster way of cornering in motorsports. By curling or gripping the pedals with your toes, you'll have a much harder time achieving the trail braking effect, I guess. Again, highly subjective. If you put in the hours, you'll be able to master any discipline. But unlearning bad habits, for instance, when switching from linear to load cell pedals, this can take quite a lot of time. Now, this longer arc brings me back to topic muscle memory. The amount of force needed for certain corners is something you'll learn over time, and wearing shoes will give you a different experience here. Racing shoes often provide more of a rounded instead of an angular heel, which helps to roll the foot more naturally instead of pivoting it on its edge. Also, the sole of racing shoes is a lot softer and thinner than your typical pair of sneakers in order to have a better and more sensitive feeling of how aggressive you're hitting the pedals. And this absolutely makes sense. Whenever the winter season starts and I'm getting in my car with a pair of winter boots, I tend to stomp way too hard on the brakes for the first time than if I was using sneakers, simply because there is a much thicker layer of rubber below my feet, which takes away the amount of control I have. And lastly, some people prefer to use sim racing socks, which are essentially nothing else than overpriced non-slip socks with a cool looking branding. Jokes aside, I've tried these, and the way they help with is to prevent sliding if you have very smooth pedal plates where shoes won't grip all that well. This can absolutely improve consistency when you're having issues with constant repositioning of your feet, but again, this might not be for you if you don't like racing in socks. As mentioned in the beginning, in motorsports, especially professional drivers, all have to wear gloves and shoes. Gloves might take away a bit of feeling when pushing buttons on the wheel, but they also provide better grip whenever it's necessary. On the other hand, pun intended, spending almost $1,000 on a sim racing steering wheel will maybe make you want to be able to feel and appreciate the material every time you're using it, which is totally understandable to me. I hope this video was more helpful and entertaining than being confusing. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching, and until next time.